Well, I think, looking at the redactions, the things they pulled out of the memoranda, fairly clear as far as I'm concerned that Mitchell and Jessen are involved, that they're behind those blackouts at several places. At least they're prime suspects. But, it's clear from these memoranda that these psychologists, consultants who studied the SEER program and other classical techniques of torture, because many of these things have been used by, and how did they come into the SEER program to start with? Because the SEER program was focused on techniques that have been used by the Soviet Union, by Communist China, by North Korea, and North Vietnam, a great pack to be emulating. Those were the techniques against which the SEER program was supposed to insulate. So those are the techniques that SEER incorporated and used as its training program. So in effect, what we're getting here is a filtered reproduction of communist techniques used by the Soviets, the North Koreans, the Chinese, and the North Vietnamese. And psychologists are working along the way to make them more effective. There's no consideration given to the Hippocratic Oath, the obligation to do no harm, and indeed there's an ethos that runs through this of duty to the Central Intelligence Agency to make its work more effective, not to the subject or to the prisoner.
We're going to come back to Scott Horton in a minute as we talk about the release of 4 government memos from the Bush administration years, known as the torture memos. I also want to ask you about the latest news on the Spanish case. Scott Horton is an attorney and blogger. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute. Marcel Khalife from the screen. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from San Francisco on our many-city Community Voices community media tour. Right now, we're talking to Scott Horton, the human rights attorney and blogger. We're talking about the latest news on President Obama releasing 4 lightly redacted memos from the Bush-era Justice Department, but saying that that CIA officials need not fear prosecution. I wanted to go for a minute to what former CIA Director Michael Hayden had to say on MSNBC Thursday. This is before the release of the memos.
On balance, the agency's view, certainly my view, is that on balance, the release of the memos harms American security, and therefore I think the best course of action would have been to have kept them classified. The president, when he issued his executive order tying all American agencies to the Army Field Manual, also launched a 6-month study to determine whether or not the Army Field Manual and the techniques, the 19 techniques contained therein, are sufficient in all cases facing the Republic. The degree to which we make these techniques public, that we tell our enemies the outer limits of American interrogation techniques, it moots the study that the president directed, because it will effectively take these techniques off the table because our enemy will know all of our approaches to him. So there are a variety of reasons I think it would have been best to keep the technique secret. That's just one of them.
Scott Horton, your response.
Well, I think if we had a little bit more candid Michael Hayden, we'd hear him saying something else. In fact, it was reported in Bart Gellman's book, Angler, that around the time of the 2004 elections, he had a very, very strong focus on and fear of prosecution if the things he was involved with should become public, a matter of public knowledge. And I think that's what's in the back of his mind here. I don't think it's national security at all. In fact, these techniques are very well known. The Red Cross report, which was published, you had Mark Danner on your show talking about it, described all these techniques in terrific detail. I mean, so it was in a sense no surprise when we saw these memos. They were describing the techniques we knew and we anticipated based on the Red Cross's own report. So no surprise, no news, and concerned by General Hayden for his own hide.
We just got this report from Spain's Scott Horton. Spanish prosecutors have formally recommended against an investigation into allegations that 6 senior Bush administration officials gave legal cover for the torture of terror suspects at Guantanamo Bay. While their ruling is not binding, the announcement all but dooms prospects for the case against the men going forward. That a report from the Associated Press. Scott Horton, can you explain what you understand at this point?
Well, the Associated Press is giving you extremely faulty legal analysis because a decision as to whether the case will go forward rests entirely with the investigating judge. The Spanish system is not like the American system where prosecutors decide who and when to bring cases and who to prosecute. In the Spanish system, the prosecution is managed by an investigating judge. In this case, it's Baltasar Garzón. And you may recall he handled the case involving Augusto Pinochet, and he did that against the stern opposition of Spanish prosecutors, I think, which shows you the weight that recommendation may hold with him and his court. But there's a different consideration to weigh in here as well, and that is that this is a statement that was announced by the prosecutors at the Audiencia Nacional in Madrid. And we know, in fact, that those prosecutors who made this recommendation not to go forward, in fact, concluded that the case should be prosecuted. They prepared a 37-page memorandum, and I've talked with several people in Madrid who've read it, that laid out the case, showed how it could fairly easily be brought, how it involved a joint criminal enterprise, how it could be sustained on the basis of documents, including some of those that were released yesterday. And that decision by the career prosecutors was overridden in a political act by Spain's Attorney General, who's a political figure, who is a member of the cabinet of Prime Minister José Zapatero. Moreover, the Attorney General's decision, which was announced yesterday morning in Madrid, came after several days of high-level discussions between Washington and the Zapatero government, during the course of which I've been told the Obama administration suggested very strongly that the pendency of this case was inconvenient, and that it would be viewed as a great favor by Washington if Zapatero's government could do what was within its power to shut this down. And I think what we see here is an accommodating nod from José Zapatero. So it has really nothing to do with justice, and it has nothing to do with the merits of the case. It's a political act, and it's certain to be understood by the judges of the Audiencia Nacional as a political act, which means I don't think it really forms much of a barrier to the prosecution going forward.
Scott Horton, I want to thank you for being with us, a blogger and lawyer who's been following these cases very closely, speaking to us from Washington, D.C.